Management of ongoing business operations and processes require a different approach to the management of one-off tasks or projects. Project management requires a distinct set of skills and knowledge that enable you to establish, organize, and motivate a team of skilled professionals to ensure that a unique temporary endeavor is completed on time and on budget, through this delivering valuable outcome to a customer or organization. Throughout any project, it is essential for the project manager to ensure that quality and scope are maintained. Sadly, most projects fail, at least in part, to meet their objectives. Despite or because of this, over recent decades, project management has become a rapidly growing discipline in its own right, and this trend shows no sign of slowing down. Organizations at every level are beginning to understand the benefits of a formalized approach to project management led by an experienced, skilled professional. The advantageous effects of professional project management can be seen both in developing and developed nations, wherever such an approach is applied across industries in both the public and private sectors. There is a tendency among much of the general working population to belittle the role of the project manager or to view them in a negative light, attaching to the title a stigma of busybodies with no real relevance, authority, or skill. Skeptics readily announce that anyone can manage a project. As evidence, they state that project managers never existed until recent times. The skeptics argue that they themselves are perfectly capable of managing their deadlines or successfully completing personal projects in their everyday life, with the implication that managing a full-scale project for an international company requires no additional skill or expertise. This stigma is based on false assumptions and lack of knowledge about the complexities involved in the role of a project manager. To get the skeptic to begin to understand this, first ask them to think about how often they fail to achieve something that they plan to do in their personal life. How often do self-improvement or personal development projects that they undertake actually get off the ground? And how long do they manage to maintain the effort? This could be anything from weight loss and healthy eating to learning a language or decorating their home. If being truthful, most people will realize that they actually are not quite as great at managing projects as they like to think, even on this small scale. Next, ask the skeptic to consider what steps they would take to successfully manage a project involving a large team who may be spread around the globe and speaking different languages, with tight deadlines and budgetary constraints, the scope of which is set by an external agent with typically unrealistic expectations. You should see them back down fairly quickly. As glimpsed above, there is much more to the role of project manager than may at first be obvious. In some cases, this can seem daunting. Perhaps you have just been handed a project for the first time. You hear your mouth saying, "Thank you," but your mind is in turmoil thinking, "Oh no!" This new undertaking may thrust you into a role you have never been in before, way beyond your comfort zone. As you begin to assess what needs to be done, the myriad tasks and considerations involved in this new workload will likely soon start to look like an unnavigable, twisting labyrinth looming in your path. At the back of your mind is the knowledge that this is make or break for you. If things go well, it could set your career on an incredible upward trajectory. Of course, if things go wrong, well, let's not think about that. PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy of, well, whatever subject you have studied. The reason is that philosophy, as a discipline, breaks subjects and concepts down to their essential elements and fundamental principles. Getting back to basics in this manner, understanding the fundamental building blocks of project management lays a foundation on which to build for those setting out on their project management journey, and also provides insight to the underlying reasons, too often forgotten, for using the more complex tools and processes familiar to those with experience in the field. It is always useful to step back and consider what you hoped to achieve when you started out and what progress you have made. It can completely change where the path that stretches in front of you leads. This outlines the role and responsibilities of a project manager, as well as considering the qualities, characteristics, and skills that make a project manager great. By the end, you should have a new respect for the role and a good understanding of the fundamental skills and principles that will guide you on your way. Whether you have just been handed your first project, you are a recent graduate looking to break into the field of project management, you are considering a career change, or you are a seasoned, experienced professional, reviewing project management basics can be hugely beneficial. What is a project? A project by nature is very different from process. A process is a set of activities that are repeated over and over again on a regular basis to reproduce the same result. In other words, they are ongoing operations. For example, in automobile manufacture, a process might be the sum of activities that take place along a vehicle assembly line in order to turn out one finished vehicle. While this process may occasionally be tweaked, overall it will largely remain the same for a long period of time, and it will continue to run until that vehicle model is discontinued. A project, on the other hand, is a temporary endeavor. It is a series of activities undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result known as the project outcome or deliverable. More specifically, a project is a set of activities for which the end result, the time frame, and the investment of people, technology, and money is defined at the outset. It can be assumed that the end result is something of value to the customer or organization commissioning the project, and that this deliverable must meet the expectations of the customer. Projects can vary massively in size or scope. The term small is always relevant to the organization. What is inevitable is that the outcome holds some importance to the company as a whole, or at least some person or department within it. If the outcome was not important, there would be no point in undertaking the project. As a project manager, it is necessary to remain objective when it comes to considering the size and importance of any project you are undertaking. Of course, when you are put in charge of something, it is important to you and you will want to do the best possible job. You will desire recognition brought about by making an impact. However, it is essential not to overstate the importance of the project in the grand scheme of things. While a small project may have a desirable outcome for a company, more often than not, it will be critical to the company's success or something they wish to throw unlimited resources at. The number one principle to work by as a project manager is never expend more time, money, or effort than is necessary to achieve the specified outcomes. Every project, large or small, is subject to what are commonly referred to as the triple constraints, though in reality this alludes to 4 or 5 considerations that are important in terms of governing what can be achieved by a project team. The triple constraints are traditionally thought of as time, budget, and scope. These constraints are often depicted visually, with each forming one side of a triangle. The equation A plus B equals C, where A equals time, B equals budget, and C equals scope, can be used to roughly explain the relationship between these 3 factors. An increase or decrease in any factor has repercussions for the project in terms of the other 2. For instance, an increase in scope necessitates a reciprocal increase in time, budget, or both. Similarly, if the time allowed for completion of a project is shortened, either the budget will have to be raised or the scope diminished. These factors must always be kept in balance. Throughout the entire equation, no matter what is happening in terms of the 3 major constraints, quality must be maintained and risk must be mitigated. These are the other 2 aspects that can be seen as setting parameters for a project. Quality is usually drawn inside the triangle formed by time, budget, and scope, as is must always remain consistent. In some interpretations of the triple constraint, risk is placed outside of the triangle to the top. This shows that risk exists as an external factor that could negatively impact the project. Generally, risks left unaddressed or unmitigated lead to unplanned increases in one or more of the 3 main constraints, throwing everything out of balance. The baseline is where any project ultimately succeeds or fails. Essentially, this is the approved plan for the project or the schedule. Often the baseline plan will be drawn up in a Gantt chart, which uses colored blocks representing tasks or stages of a project and places these in sequence along the timeline. The baseline plan must be decided early in the project, and it must set out how everything will fit together within the triple constraints. A baseline is used as a tool for analysis, enabling a project manager to easily compare the current performance of the project team with the expected performance at any given time phase. Projects tend to be carried out by project teams. These teams typically consist of people who would not ordinarily work together, perhaps people from different departments or offices, or sometimes hired consultants from external companies. Project teams can be large or small, co-located or working in offices on different sides of the world, linked only by technology. Very often in large multinational corporations, project teams will include members who speak different languages or who work in alternate time zones. The main designations of people typically involved in a project are the project manager, team members, project stakeholders, the customer or client, the end user, and the Change Control Board, CCB, though many of these groups may overlap. While most of the designations are self-explanatory, some may be unfamiliar, so a brief explanation follows. Stakeholders is a term used to describe anybody with a vested interest in the project outcome. This can refer to individuals, groups, or organizations, customers, clients, or partners. Essentially, the term stakeholder denotes anyone actively involved in or affected by success or failure of the project. The CCB is a group of representative stakeholders designated in the project plan as having the authority to approve or deny changes to the project baseline. Instituting a CCB at the outset of a project can help take pressure off the project manager, leaving them free to focus on controlling the process more so than worrying about the minutiae when decisions need to be made. It is the responsibility of the project manager to determine at the outset what it will be possible to do given the project constraints, negotiating the baseline with input from the members of the project team and any other stakeholders in the project. Changes can be made to the baseline as the project progresses should an issue arise that necessitates this. However, any change must be authorized by the CCB. Changes to the baseline should be kept to an absolute minimum. The baseline of a project will be divided into 4 or 5 significant phases known as the project life cycle. These phases are usually initiation, planning, execution, including monitoring and control, and closing. We will look at this in detail later. Milestones, as might be expected, are significant points in the project at which a deliverable product increment is produced or a phase of work is completed. Milestones are often demarcated on the Gantt chart or baseline document using a black diamond. More often than not, milestones can be identified completely naturally without effort. Every milestone reached by a project team should be recognized and celebrated in some way. This need not be extravagant, but it is important for the upkeep of morale and engagement. Why do projects need project managers? Project management has its roots in the Industrial Revolution beginning in the mid to late 19th century. In the early part of the 19th century, the staple aspects of daily life rarely moved forward, and there was little call for the introduction of new projects, technology, or services. If change happened, it was most often on a small scale and occurred in gradual natural increments. With the exponential growth of mass and automated production during the Industrial Revolution, however, there came a constant and growing need to introduce new product lines, services, technologies, and processes, as well as to build new factories. In other words, there was an explosion of new projects that needed to be undertaken. Henry Gantt was employed in building battleships for the war effort during World War I. Each ship had to be completed in a short amount of time and with limited resources. Gantt created a chart, eponymously christened the Gantt chart, that visually displayed sequenced project steps and how they fitted in the allocated time scale for the overall project, i.e., building a warship. The first battleship ever to be built on time and on budget by the U.S. Navy resulted, and the Gantt chart has been adopted for use in projects large and small ever since. Such projects include the Hoover Dam and the Eisenhower Highway Network. Having become a standardized and ubiquitous tool in project management over the last 100 years, Gantt charts represent the first real instance of a formalized approach to project management. The urgency and limitations of wartime that necessitated Gantt's chart led to a huge evolution in project management throughout both the First and Second World Wars. Every project suddenly had tighter constraints in terms of time, resources, and budget, meaning new methodologies, tools, and processes had to be developed in order to see weapons, technologies, vehicles, and human troops built, trained, and deployed as part of the war effort. Businesses not directly related to the war industry also had to find new ways to function, perhaps using limited resources or having to train new employees. At the time, the term project may not have been used to refer to the training of personnel or the building of a warship, but given the definition in the preceding chapter, the label can be applied with hindsight. Certainly, as with the Gantt chart, the methods and tools developed to manage such undertakings form the basis of modern project management techniques. The explosion of projects within the business world did not slow when World War II ended. Massive demand ensued to rebuild and update infrastructure. Many exciting and innovative large-scale projects were undertaken across the nation and globe, often involving new technologies or concepts. The introduction of nuclear energy gave rise to the famous critical path method in project management, while the worldwide housing boom saw many varied project management tools introduced. Early into the digital age has seen more projects created than ever before, particularly in the field of software. Not only are projects proliferating, but they are becoming increasingly complex and far-reaching. With today's interconnectivity, large international teams can be brought together at the touch of a button, able to share ideas and collaborate on projects in a way never previously imagined. This has allowed the scope of projects to increase massively, utilizing skills, knowledge, and expertise of the best people all over the world. Many limitations to what can be achieved by a project team have been removed in this way, but understandably, multinational teams in diverse locations bring new challenges in terms of project management. Where project manager may have previously been a title assigned to a particularly organized, motivated, or well-connected individual team member who also played another role within the company, today it is increasingly becoming a career in its own right. The fast pace of change in the modern business world means that more and more businesses are becoming project-focused as a means to achieve success and thus demanding disciplined, consistent approaches to carrying out of projects. There is a real need for professionals who are skilled and experienced in leading project teams, and project management has clearly emerged a vocation in its own right. The Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMBOK, has in recent years been developed by professional project managers and published through the auspices of the Project Management Institute, PMI. Containing a wealth of information and advice for budding and experienced project management professionals alike, the PMBOK has also led to the creation of globally recognized qualifications and certifications in the field. Careers and positions centering on project management are prevalent in nearly every industry throughout the world, and employers increasingly readily look for these qualifications and credentials in order to hire project management consultants and professionals, demonstrating the clear need for this type of work across all industries. The project life cycle. The Work Breakdown Structure, WBS, is a document with hierarchical structure used to define the scope of a project with a focus on deliverables. Every task involved in producing the final deliverables, as well as intermediate outcomes known as product increments, will be recorded on the WBS, which usually uses a flow chart layout to show dependencies. The WBS provides a detailed map of everything that needs to be done to take a project from conception to completion, which, while inevitably necessary, can become incredibly complex. To make organizing and understanding the workload of a project simpler, tasks from the WBS can typically be seen as falling into 1 or 4 fundamental stages that make up the project cycle. Stage 1. Initiating. Project initiation is often considered to be one of the most important stages in the project life cycle. This is where the entire project outline is constructed among a small invested work group made up of important stakeholders. During the initiation period, the work group will work to produce an outline for the project that describes in detail the objectives, critical success factors, and expected deliverables from the point of view of the end user. The project manager will be expected to carry out research and communicate with many parties in order to ensure that the project outline is realistic. It is at this early stage that the triple constraints need to be defined and assessed to ensure they balance. Typically, executives within the company will dictate the initial scope, timescale, and budget, but this will not be based on research and analysis. The project manager needs to take this upon themselves and address any issues that may make the project unfeasible. Equally important at this stage is assembling the right project team, another duty that falls to the project manager. Once people chosen for their skills, knowledge, and expertise have accepted a role within the project team, information on the project outline needs to be passed to them. The culture of openness, clear communication, and trust should be built from the word go. Decision-making authority should be assigned during initiation, resulting in the creation of the project's CCB. The deliverable at this stage is a detailed project charter including all this information. Stage 2. Planning. The planning stage usually involves the most intensive work for the project manager. Planning often overlaps with later stages when changes to the project baseline are necessitated through monitoring and control. During the planning stage, the entire project team works together to develop an in-depth plan detailing work that must be done in order to achieve the project outcomes. This stage brings together the diverse knowledge and skills of all team members. While this can be extremely productive, differences in opinion can often lead to disagreements and a need to compromise. The role of the project manager during planning is to oversee all meetings and collaborations, collecting data and drawing up the agreed-upon WBS and schedule. The project manager will need to communicate with all team members throughout planning in order to prepare detailed subsections of the overall project outline. Example: procurement plans, quality assurance plans, communication plans, change and risk management plans, sequencing of resources, and a detailed budget with contingency considerations. Stage 3. Execution. When the project enters the execution stage, this is where the rubber hits the road. Work gets underway on designing, developing, and testing deliverables. The team begins to work through the tasks outlined in the planning stages to create a finished project. There are many different methodologies used to keep a project on track throughout the execution phase, but crucially for the project manager, this stage involves monitoring and control of processes. As the project manager, you will need to constantly monitor the project team's overall performance and output against the project plan using key performance indicators, status reports, and one-on-one communication. It is essential to analyze the project's status and conditions continuously to ensure that things stay on track and within the triple constraints while quality of deliverables is maintained. Where red flags appear showing that the project may be behind schedule or of scope, the project manager must identify a need to adjust or adapt the baseline, though decisions of how best to do this often rest with the CCB. Throughout the execution, monitoring, and controlling stage, the project manager must communicate effectively with all stakeholders. There is a constant need for flexibility and the ability to revert back to planning quickly and smoothly. Stage 4. Closing. Closing is the end game of a project. Getting it right is crucial. Completing or cancellation of a project both count as a close, and while the former is of course preferable, it is important to be aware that the latter may sometimes be necessary. Early termination of a project that is not able to meet its objectives leaves the door open to regroup and try again by limiting loss and waste. On the other hand, letting a project run on blind hope that it will somehow come together only to experience failure far down the line can end careers. Though careful assessment and analysis in the monitoring and control phases, the project manager needs to be fully aware of risks or other factors that could negatively impact a project and ready to call a halt as soon as it becomes apparent that objectives cannot be fulfilled. Assuming the more positive scenario in which close comes from completion, this is the stage at which the team and project manager need to test the deliverable, seek acceptance from the client, hand over the deliverables, which often involves training, document the project outcomes, complete the accounts, evaluate lessons learned, and finally disperse. During closing, team members may start to depart when their particular role within the project team has been fulfilled. It can happen without you noticing that people leave the project as they finish their work and you are left at the end with no team around you. As far as possible, a project manager should work to avoid this scenario and keep people engaged until the end. Important both to ensure customer expectations are met. If changes are required, this can be difficult if someone has already begun working on another project, and to debrief, acknowledging lessons learned. While currently a formal evaluation is performed in only 20% to 30% of projects due to the costs and time involved, this should be seen as an essential operation. A debrief in which each team member evaluates their experiences within the project, sharing what went well and where challenges occurred, enables a valuable transfer of knowledge, allowing everyone to benefit from the lessons learned. This information can often be crucial to a project manager in initiating and planning their next project. Finally, celebration should be considered a key part of closing. This does not have to be a big deal and should be appropriate given the size and importance of the project. Celebration can take the form of anything from a monetary bonus, a team meal, a cake, or even just a sincere personal thank you to each team member. Such recognition triggers reward systems in the brain, making the team members involved in the project feel accomplished and satisfied with a job well done. Celebrating success leads to greater engagement in future projects. How the project lifecycle fits within the delivery process cycle. The delivery process is the sum of activities that each member of the project team will undertake in order to fulfill their role in delivering the required project outcomes. The delivery process has similar stages that are linked to the project lifecycle: definition, design, development, deployment, departure. It is important to differentiate this from the project lifecycle. The lifecycle is the responsibility of the project manager and refers to activities and outputs of the team as a whole, whereas the delivery process is worked through by individual team members or small work groups collaborating on specific tasks. The project lifecycle refers to the work that happens in the background to coordinate the work being done by the team members as they complete the delivery process. The project lifecycle is defined in the PMBOK published by the PMI. If plotted on a graph with the stages of delivery process along the x-axis and work along the y-axis, the line showing each stage of the project would gradually rise, peak, and then taper, covering various aspects of the delivery process. Initiation starts on day one of the project, rising steeply to its peak generally found in early design stages of the delivery process. From here, it tapers out towards deployment, at which point all initiation activities will usually be complete. Some planning activities will also take place at the very start of a project, overlapping heavily with initiation. The rise is a little less steep, with the planning peak found mid-deployment. This is because most flexible, modern, versatile, and successful project management models allow the team to return to planning stages and adjust processes in response to issues or risks. Planning tapers off gradually as the projects move towards its close, ending around deployment or departure. Execution, including monitoring and controlling, may begin earlier than you would expect, but the rise in this kind of activity is much more gradual. The line continues to rise beyond planning, with the peak being reached late in the development or early in the deployment stage. Closing tends to begin during deployment, rising steeply and dropping fairly steeply also. There is a gradual build-up and wind-down of each stage, and they all overlap each other. It is not a case of certain activities exclusively belonging to each stage, with each having black and white, cut-and-dried parameters. Remembering this can be hugely beneficial in successful project management. The role and responsibilities of a project manager. Project managers are ultimately responsible for the success or failure of a project, with it resting on their shoulders to ensure the project team achieves the specified objectives while also remaining within the time and budgetary constraints. While everyone in a project team will have expertise allowing them to take responsibility for specific tasks, the project manager has an overarching responsibility to tie together the efforts of individual team members, moving the project steadily forward toward completion. There is no single right or wrong way to manage a project. There are a wealth of tools and techniques developed to ensure projects run smoothly and efficiently. This does not mean, however, that there is a single one-size-fits-all solution that can be used to make any project successful. Project management is a dynamic discipline that requires quick thinking, communication, and planning skills. The overall goal of any project is to achieve the desired outcomes to a high-quality standard with minimal expenditure of time, budget, or resources. Since every project involves different teams, circumstances, constraints, and expectations, looking to find a simple recipe to follow in every project you undertake simply will not work. There are, however, some responsibilities that always belong to the project manager, no matter how they deem it best to uphold these. Guarantee objectives. A project manager's first responsibility is to guarantee that the objectives of the project are achievable at the outset. Executives provide a set of constraints in terms of scope, budget, and time for every project they hand to a project manager. However, these are not usually based on careful analysis and planning. A good project manager will take the time to confirm that these parameters can be worked to before committing to the project. If the triple constraint equation, A plus B equals C, cannot be made to balance, it is the duty of the project manager to bring this to the attention of the company leaders, project owner, stakeholders, and/or customer so that essential changes can be made. In other words, it is the project manager's responsibility to ensure that the project owner, executive within the company responsible for commissioning the project, and the customer, if external to the company, have realistic expectations from the outset. Blindly trying to do whatever is requested without first assessing whether this is possible may mean a project is doomed to fail before it even gets underway. No one will thank you for the wasted time and energy they put into a project that was impossible to complete from the outset. Recruit the project team. Project managers build project teams. This is a fundamental responsibility of a project manager, and it is essential to make sure that the talented people are recruited in the right roles. Before building a project team, it is important to consider what skills and expertise will be needed to complete the project, and then compare this list with another detailing the available human resources. As you go through the people within your organization, simply add and subtract team members as necessary until you are left with the most robust and efficient setup. Some team members may play multiple roles in a project team, being involved at several different stages in the delivery process. It is not uncommon for project managers to be selected and promoted from other roles within a company, and often you may find that you are equipped with certain skill sets that could be useful within the project. It is important not to narrow focus based on personal expertise, nor take on extra work because of your capabilities. In most projects, there will be more than enough to deal with without letting yourself in for additional roles. Communicate and inspire. Not only do project managers need to assemble the project team, but they also need to be the driving force organizing and motivating the team throughout the project. Communication is key to this role, and it works both ways. You must share information to ensure everyone is on the same page and knows what is expected of them. Even more important, though, is the need to receive input from every member of the team. They are the people best placed to let you know what is happening real time. It is through clear and effective communication with the project team that you will most easily and accurately be able to identify potential setbacks in time to mitigate risk and prevent problems. The importance of communication does not end there. Project managers need to influence and inspire any and all people who will be affected by the change that the project team implements. Effective communication with every stakeholder, no matter how minor their interest, is the single most important factor in the success of most projects. It is essential to get people committed to a common goal and maintain zeal, passion, and vision throughout the project. This is no easy task, as human nature makes us naturally adverse to change. Strategize and plan. It is commonly said that proper planning prevents poor performance, and around 80% of project management is about planning, with only 20% focused on implementation. Anyone can complete a project by increasing the time or budget. The challenge is to use as little of these resources as possible to produce a deliverable of the highest possible quality. After identifying participants and people impacted by the project, work with your team to devise strategies for success. Draft step-by-step plans for achieving objectives, drawing on the knowledge and skill of all team members. This may be something that is easier said than done, as it is typically difficult to get a group of people with different thoughts, experiences, and areas of expertise to reach an agreement. As a project manager, you need to get everyone marching to the same beat. However, you generally will lack any real authority over anyone involved in the project and may often find that you know much less than them about the technical details of the work involved. The best way to succeed, then, is to show your skill in organization and planning to gain the trust of team members and stakeholders. There is not a single aspect of any project that should go unplanned. Consider how information will flow and when, where it is needed. Create a project charter and communicate this to everyone so the whole team is aware of expectations, timescales, resource dependencies, and constraints. Monitor and control project execution. If properly planned, implementation of project work will be like conducting an orchestra. You simply need to keep players in check with clear, constant communication and leadership. Use observation, analysis, and specifically developed tools to determine if the project is on track, ensuring that work is coordinated and understood so that it can be completed within the given time and budget restraints. Mobility is crucial, and a project manager should rarely be found sitting at a desk or shut away in an office. You need to be constantly on the move, checking in with team members regularly to review progress and get up-to-the-minute status reports. When not engaged with team members, you should be meeting with other stakeholders, constantly ensuring communication is flowing up and down the chain. Listen carefully to all stakeholders and team members to detect if and where things are not going to plan. At all times, costs and timescales should be constantly monitored to make sure the project remains on track. One of the most helpful tools for a project manager and the whole team is a project notebook. This will contain all documents created in the planning phase, the schedule of work, and any reports, graphs, charts, or other tools you use to monitor progress. Keeping a project notebook fully updated means it can be used as a quick reference when on the move and left at your desk if you are out of the office so that the project team can access important information. A project notebook can be stored online if the project team is not co-located or simply to give greater access to the information. Detect and resolve problems. When things fail to go to plan, you may have a problem. Good planning will have looked ahead and worked in some contingency strategies, but it is never possible to predict everything that is going to occur in the course of project execution. The most accomplished project managers can identify issues creeping over the horizon long before anyone else sees them coming. It is important to remain proactive, address any problems as soon as they become apparent, effectively nipping them in the bud. This requires many skills, but the most effective thing to do is to manage by being present on the floor and with the team. Again, be mobile, talk to your team, and listen intently, actively, and analytically. Learn to pick up on subtle signs of uncertainty as team members report, which may sometimes belie a confident statement. In order to pick up on subtle signs and remain informed, it is necessary to be involved with the project team and build strong relationships with the team members and stakeholders. Interact with them as often as possible. This is the number one tool for detecting issues. Resolving problems will normally involve some form of negotiation, which may result in a need to alter the scope of the project. As far as possible, though, the scope should remain as it was set out in the baseline plan, with all and only work that is required being done. Resolving unforeseen issues can cause the scope of a project to creep as team members navigate obstacles. The project manager must always remain aware of creep, balancing the triple constraints, and exerting control over what is and is not included in the project accordingly. Mitigate risk. One of the most important aspects of project management is risk mitigation. This differs from detecting and resolving problems, as it involves a risk response planning technique performed at the outset of the project and associated with threats. Risk mitigation is about identifying possible threats and devising ways to prevent them or minimize their impacts should the worst happen. It entails forming a plan to reduce both the probability and impact of potential risks before there is even any sign of them occurring. Should the anticipated risk then raise its ugly head, there will be a strategy already in place to deal with it. This is a much less responsive task than dealing with problems, relying on foresight, planning, and strategy. After completion of any project, it is important to evaluate what has gone well and what has not. This will leave you much better positioned to begin the next project, making it easier every time to identify potential risks and plan to mitigate these. Quality control. Too often, project managers overlook their responsibility for ensuring the quality of the product deliverable. Placing quality within the triangle formed by the triple constraints symbolizes the need to monitor the output of the project team to ensure that quality is inherent in every deliverable and every outcome meets the customer's requirements and expectations. In this sense, the project manager can be viewed in a similar way to an expediter working in a 5-star restaurant. An expediter takes responsibility for bringing together all the dishes that make up a table's order, finishing them with garnish and inspecting each dish for quality. The aim is to ensure everything goes out at the correct time and that nothing is served substandard. If anything is found to be below par, it is sent back to the relevant station in the kitchen to be improved before the customer sees it, thus ensuring only high-quality finished products are sent out to the table. In the same way, a project manager must inspect and test every deliverable part of a project and send it back to the team to be redone if it is not up to the standard the customer requires. Something to remember. Early, we noted the importance of correctly determining the significance of a given project to the organization and customer. A project manager must always take care not to turn their project into a mission. You should always aim to get the most from a project in terms of learning and development opportunities it has to offer and to do things well. However, it is all too easy to go overboard with tools, techniques, plans, and strategies and monitoring, resulting in total overkill. Take your responsibilities seriously, but always ensure that you use an appropriate amount of rigor given the size and significance of the project. Project managers who regularly use overkill end up with a bad reputation. In general, every project should involve the following: creation of a task list, identification of dependencies, assigning of people, setting of due dates, monitoring progress, and some form of evaluation. However, depending on the size and importance of a project, you should often avoid complex and time-consuming activities such as developing Monte Carlo simulations, determining a critical path, creating detailed contingency plans, drawing up a resource matrix, producing a detailed communications plan, detailed reporting, version control, EVA analysis, etc. Use the tools you need to get the job done efficiently and to a high standard, but at all costs avoid creating extra unnecessary work for yourself or your team. Project Manager Profile. While there is no single one-size-fits-all strategy that can guarantee project success, the possession of certain knowledge, skills, and characteristics often distinguishes exceptional and successful project managers. When looking at the top-performing project management professionals, you will see these same traits and knowledge exemplified time and again. By cultivating these attributes and developing such expertise in yourself, you are certain to enhance your own success in the field of project management. Below, you will find a breakdown of the key characteristics and knowledge that are essential in professional project management. Characteristics. Outcome focused. Highly successful project managers share a specific trait. They focus on outcomes rather than processes. A good way to understand the advantages provided by outcome focus over process focus is to consider a mechanic. The mechanic knows hundreds of processes that go on within an engine and can fine-tune these to make an engine purr. The mechanic also has a workshop full of tools at his disposal to aid in optimizing the engine processes. However, he cannot pick out a single set of tools and processes that can be used to repair or upgrade any vehicle brought into his garage. Instead, he has to look at each individual vehicle to figure out what outcomes the owner desires and how best these can be achieved given the current state and operation of the car. Only through knowing the required outcome, example, whether the vehicle's owner wants the car to run more quietly or for the engine to produce more power, can the mechanic choose the correct tools and processes for the job. The same is true for projects. Every project manager should be armed with an array of tools and techniques that they can put to good use in achieving project success, but their primary focus must always be the overarching goals of a specific project in order to decide which of these to employ. Focusing on processes may result in a lot of unnecessary work that does not get you closer to the desired endpoint, while focusing on outcomes will ensure your team does all and only the work required to achieve the optimum result. Shrewd, decisive, and resolute. As we saw, a large part of the project manager's job revolves around detecting problems and planning to mitigate risk. As a project manager, you need to be constantly conscious and aware of yourself and others. Cultivating an observant and analytical mindset can be a great boon in project management, allowing you to quickly and easily recognize red flags. These may appear in the form of communication, example, uncertainty in team members' reports, inaction, example, if you find yourself having to repeat or amend tasks, or even in non-action. Example, you notice a task has remained incomplete for a long period. It is important to notice such red flags early on and act quickly to resolve them. This requires you to be decisive, efficiently gathering the relevant information and making prompt, appropriate decisions. There is no room for procrastination or constant negotiations. Having weighed up the situation and assured yourself you are making a good decision, you must remain resolute to get things done. Inspirational leaders. A project manager must always be ready to learn from stakeholders and team members, as well as to impart advice and make important decisions. They should be both mentors and mentees. Learning is a give and take process, so keeping an open mind allows you to learn through teaching. One thing you can learn is the capabilities and capacities of team members, which will allow you to delegate appropriately so as to avoid any team member taking on too much or being left at a loose end. This is all about communicating your requirements and ideas effectively, learning about your team, and inspiring them to work effectively together. An important distinction to remember is to lead a team and manage a project. In other words, treat people as people. Do not manage them as if they are tools or tasks. It is important in leading a team to always remain available and responsive, dealing with queries and communication from and to your team in an efficient, prompt, and appropriate manner. Charismatic communicators. The secret to great project management is building and nurturing relationships with members of the project team and all stakeholders. The relationships you build with team members are the most critical, as you must rely on these people to get anything done. No matter how good you are at planning and organizing, your project will not get off the ground without the work of your team members. Thus, a crucial skill to master is being able to get close to people quickly, learning about them, while at the same time gathering their trust and confidence. Naturally, social project managers have the advantage here, but if this does not describe you, you must work hard and practice meaningful interaction both on and offline. This is the single most important attribute you can have, as project management is 90% about effective communication. Every project is inherently collaborative. You need to be able to get honest, open input from team members, as well as to be able to communicate expectations and information in a way people will respond to you. The only way to do this effectively is to get to know your team and nurture one-on-one relationships with each individual. Time is ever a valuable resource, so you need to learn to do this fast. Passionate motivators. In order to lead and inspire your team, getting everyone engaged in the work and marching to the beat of the same drum, you must demonstrate a genuine passion for your project. Attitude is highly contagious. If it seems as though you are not fully engaged with the project, it is unlikely that any team member will feel a particular drive to be involved or do well. People do not sign up to complete tasks they can do. They sign up to be involved in things they care about. When assembling a project team, you will do much better to communicate a sense of passion. From the outset, every member will feel fired up thanks to your commitment to the project outcomes. Importantly, passion cannot be faked. People will see through this straight away, and this falsity will prove detrimental both in motivating the team and building relationships. One way to ignite real passion, even for seemingly mundane projects, is to keep asking why until you are able to uncover a fundamental reason behind what you are being asked to do that resonates deeply with you. For example, if your project is to create a new system in line with health and safety regulations, this may seem pretty boring and trivial. The first time you ask why, the obvious answer is, so the company does not breach legal requirements. Not so inspiring. However, if you keep asking why, eventually you will almost certainly find a meaningful reason. In this case, it could be to do with people feeling safe and valued at work. Skilled professionals. While it is necessary to focus on project outcomes to ensure that you apply the best practices in a given project, you must also be armed with a full working knowledge of tools and techniques best suited to different tasks. Without practical skills and knowledge, it will, of course, be difficult or even impossible to determine the best way to achieve the desired outcome. The top-performing project management professionals have devoted time and energy to studying best practices. They also know that this is an ongoing requirement, with professional bodies such as the Project Management Institute, PMI, and Prince 2 constantly updating and developing new methodologies. It is crucial to maintain high standards of expertise, and exceptional project managers always keep up to date with new developments in their field. Invest in training and qualifications. No matter what level you are at, there is always more that can be learned. Attending conferences, both global and local, is a fantastic way to share ideas and learn from thought leaders and other project management professionals with practical experience. Particularly important at the moment is knowledge of how to apply and use specifically designed project management software to the best effect. Professional development should remain a central concern throughout your career. Learning never ends. Areas of critical knowledge, as defined in PMBOK. The Project Management Body of Knowledge, published by the PMI, defines 10 critical areas of knowledge and expertise that project managers need. These are listed below. 1. Integration management. This is essentially knowledge of the various tools and techniques that can be used in bringing a project together. Integration management is about identifying, defining, and coordinating the myriad processes involved in taking a project from conception to completion. 2. Scope management. As might be assumed from the title, this is all about defining and controlling the scope of a project. Scope management expertise allows a project manager to ensure all and only required work is undertaken during project execution. 3. Time management. Time management is a familiar term, and most people will have a fairly good understanding of what this means on a personal level. We all work to manage our own time effectively. For a project manager, though, well-developed time management skills are essential, as these must be put to good use on a much larger scale. A project manager is responsible for ensuring the effective time management of an entire project time, leading to timely project completion. 4. Cost management. We have mentioned scope and time, so it should come as no surprise that the next area of knowledge involves the final of the triple constraints: cost. Cost management covers all processes involved with preparing budgets, securing funding, and monitoring costs within a project. 5. Quality management. This knowledge area includes all processes and policies employed in ensuring that final deliverables meet the requirements and expectations of the customer or project owner. 6. HR management. People are a project manager's most valuable resource. As we have said previously, it is important to lead people and manage the project, so the title of this knowledge area can be thought of as meaning HR leadership. This is about selecting, organizing, and motivating your project team. 7. Communications management. This is probably the most important area of knowledge for ensuring successful project management. This is about putting in place channels of communication, policies, and process that allow information about the project to be circulated efficiently and promptly to everyone who needs it. This is not a one-way communication from the project manager to the team and stakeholders, but a cyclical communication between all team members, the project managers, and stakeholders. 8. Risk management. The knowledge involved in risk management is all the processes that allow you to plan and strategize ways to identify and prevent risks, as well as knowledge of how to identify and appropriately respond to problems that may rise. 9. Procurement management. As a project manager, you will be responsible for securing everything the team needs to complete the project. This includes resources ranging from software and products to external services and expert consultants. 10. Stakeholder management. This area of knowledge includes all the processes involved in identifying people, groups, or organizations that impact or are impacted by the project and effectively engage them in decisions relating to and execution of the project. Avoiding the pitfalls of project management. 1/4 of projects that enter the development phase never make it to market. A whopping 31% of IT projects get canceled before they reach completion. On average, organizations only end up with 42% of the original functions specified at outset of a project when the end product is delivered. Anyone can see that these figures leave a lot to be desired in terms of project success. It is this rate of failure, or rather the hope of turning it around, that has led to the development of project management as a thriving professional discipline. Organizations are increasingly beginning to understand the wide range of skills and expertise needed to carry off a successful project and looking to employ experienced, trained professionals who are able to implement them. Companies across the globe are beginning to institute formalized approaches to project management, and the field is expanding seemingly exponentially. What makes project management professionals in such demand is the training and knowledge that allows them to avoid common pitfalls which those with lesser experience fail to navigate. To conclude this, we have summarized the information and organized it under the headings of the 5 most common project management pitfalls. Pitfall number 1, not planning. The importance of planning simply cannot be overstated. Project management is about 80% planning and 20% implementation. Care does need to be taken here, though, as you do not want to undertake unnecessary planning, resulting in overkill. Assess the size and significance of your project, then plan every aspect with the appropriate level of rigor. Pitfall 2, doing versus leading. Many project managers are either promoted from or still belong to another professional field within a company. Managing a project is often a responsibility given to a senior member of a team that will be involved in producing the project deliverable. Based on past or present expertise, it can therefore be tempting for a project manager to take on responsibility for tasks they know how to complete. This should never happen. As a project manager, you have myriad responsibilities, but these all revolve around organizing and motivating the project team, engaging stakeholders, and implementing planning and monitoring to ensure the project stays on track. Do not try to complete tasks in the delivery process. Delegate these appropriately to your team. Furthermore, as far as possible, work to ensure that your team is a self-organizing entity. Inspire them, motivate them, open channels of communication between them, and communicate requirements, expectations, and problems to them. Then sit back and let them get to work, ready to offer guidance and make decisions where necessary. Pitfall number 3, not managing triple constraints. An unforgivable mistake in project management is to ignore the interplay of the triple constraints. First, analyze the constraints given at the outset to ensure they are realistic and that you can guarantee objectives. Throughout the project, continually monitor time, cost, and scope to ensure they remain balanced, and respond quickly if you identify an imbalance. Pitfall 4, ineffective communications. We have said that 90% of project management is about communication. You must constantly be communicating with your project team and all project stakeholders to form plans, create schedules, monitor progress, respond to issues, ensure quality, and evaluate performance. However, it is not just a matter of tell everyone everything. Projects can be brought crashing down through insufficient, excessive, or unclear communications, so getting this right is essential. Pitfall 5, process versus outcome, tasks versus deliverables. The project manager must focus on the project outcomes when determining processes, tools, and techniques to employ in bringing the project together. Further to this, it is important to instill the same outlook in team members. Create a culture in which every team member maintains a focus on deliverables and objectives rather than simply on the task they are engaged in. This will provide significant advantage in terms of preventing scope creep. Set of activities that are repeated over and over again on a regular basis to reproduce the same result. In other words, they are ongoing operations. For example, in automobile manufacture, a process might be the sum of activities that take place along a vehicle assembly line in order to turn out one finished vehicle. While this process may occasionally be tweaked, overall it will largely remain the same for a long period of time, and it will continue to run until that vehicle model is discontinued. A project, on the other hand, is a temporary endeavor. It is a series of activities undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result known as the project outcome or deliverable. More specifically, a project is a set of activities for which the end result, the time frame, and the investment of people, technology, and money is defined at the outset. It can be assumed that the end result is something of value to the customer or organization commissioning the project, and that this deliverable must meet the expectations of the customer. Projects can vary massively in size or scope. The term small is always relevant to the organization. What is inevitable is that the outcome holds some importance to the company as a whole, or at least some person or department within it. If the outcome was not important, there would be no point in undertaking the project. As a project manager, it is necessary to remain objective when it comes to considering the size and importance of any project you are undertaking. Of course, when you are put in charge of something, it is important to you and you will want to do the best possible job. You will desire recognition brought about by making an impact. However, it is essential not to overstate the importance of the project in the grand lines or successfully completing personal projects in their everyday life, with the implication that managing a full-scale project for an international company requires no additional skill or expertise. This stigma is based on false assumptions and lack of knowledge about the complexities involved in the role of a project manager. To get the skeptic to begin to understand this, first ask them to think about how often they fail to achieve something that they plan to do in their personal life. How often do self-improvement or personal development projects that they undertake actually get off the ground? And how long do they manage to maintain the effort? This could be anything from weight loss and healthy eating to learning a language or decorating their home. If being truthful, most people will realize that they actually are not quite as great at managing projects as they like to think, even on this small scale. Next, ask the skeptic to consider what steps they would take to successfully manage a project involving a large team who may be spread around the globe and speaking different languages, with tight deadlines and budgetary constraints, the scope of which is set by an external agent with typically unrealistic expectations. You should see them back down fairly quickly. As glimpsed above, there is much more to the role of project manager than may at first be obvious. In some cases, this can seem daunting. Perhaps you have just been handed a project for the first time. You hear your mouth saying, "Thank you," but your mind is in turmoil thinking, "Oh no!" This new undertaking may thrust you into a role you have never been in before, way beyond your comfort zone. As you begin to assess what needs to be done, the myriad tasks and considerations involved in this new workload Management of ongoing business operations and processes require a different approach to the management of one-off tasks or projects. Project management requires a distinct set of skills and knowledge that enable you to establish, organize, and motivate a team of skilled professionals to ensure that a unique temporary endeavor is completed on time and on budget, through this delivering valuable outcome to a customer or organization. Throughout any project, it is essential for the project manager to ensure that quality and scope are maintained. Sadly, most projects fail, at least in part, to meet their objectives. Despite or because of this, over recent decades, project management has become a rapidly growing discipline in its own right, and this trend shows no sign of slowing down. Organizations at every level are beginning to understand the benefits of a formalized approach to project management led by an experienced, skilled professional. The advantageous effects of professional project management can be seen both in developing and developed nations, wherever such an approach is applied across industries in both the public and private sectors. There is a tendency among much of the general working population to belittle the role of the project manager or to view them in a negative light, attaching to the title a stigma of busybodies with no real relevance, authority, or skill. Skeptics readily announce that anyone can manage a project. As evidence, they state that project managers never existed until recent times. The skeptics argue that they themselves are perfectly capable of managing their dense scheme of things. While a small project may have a desirable outcome for a company, more often than not, it will be critical to the company's success or something they wish to throw unlimited resources at. The number one principle to work by as a project manager is never expend more time, money, or effort than is necessary to achieve the specified outcomes. Every project, large or small, is subject to what are commonly referred to as the triple constraints, though in reality this alludes to 4 or 5 considerations that are important in terms of governing what can be achieved by a project team. The triple constraints are traditionally thought of as time, budget, and scope. These constraints are often depicted visually, with each forming one side of a triangle. The equation A plus B equals C, where A equals time, B equals budget, and C equals scope, can be used to roughly explain the relationship between these 3 factors. An increase or decrease in any factor has repercussions for the project in terms of the other 2. For instance, an increase in scope necessitates a reciprocal increase in time, budget, or both. Similarly, if the time allowed for completion of a project is shortened, either the budget will have to be raised or the scope diminished. These factors must always be kept in balance. Throughout the entire equation, no matter what is happening in terms of the 3 major constraints, quality must be maintained and risk must be mitigated. These are the other 2 aspects that can be seen as setting parameters for a project. Quality is usually drawn inside the triangle formed by time, budget, and scope, must always remain consistent, will likely soon start to look like an unnavigable, twisting labyrinth looming in your path. At the back of your mind is the knowledge that this is make or break for you. If things go well, it could set your career on an incredible upward trajectory. Of course, if things go wrong, well, let's not think about that. PhD stands for Doctor of Philosophy of, whatever subject you have studied. The reason is that philosophy, as a discipline, breaks subjects and concepts down to their essential elements and fundamental principles. Getting back to basics in this manner, understanding the fundamental building blocks of project management lays a foundation on which to build for those setting out on their project management journey, and also provides insight to the underlying reasons, too often forgotten, for using the more complex tools and processes familiar to those with experience in the field. It is always useful to step back and consider what you hoped to achieve when you started out and what progress you have made. It can completely change where the path that stretches in front of you leads. This outlines the role and responsibilities of a project manager, as well as considering the qualities, characteristics, and skills that make a project manager great. By the end, you should have a new respect for the role and a good understanding of the fundamental skills and principles that will guide you on your way. Whether you have just been handed your first project, you are a recent graduate looking to break into the field of project management, you are considering a career change, or you are a seasoned, experienced professional, reviewing project management basics can be hugely beneficial. What is a project? A project by nature is very different from process. A process is a